Speaking of cinema, the next matchup we had the roughneck Shota Umino defeating the scapegoat Jack Perry, and man,
Oh
the
my god, we have so many
crowd,
questions about this.
yeah, the crowd was electric for this match. The atmosphere was nuts, and also they showed the closed circuit TV footage from the fight in All In London, where Punk attacked Jack Perry. So that aired on Wednesday. So this man was walking in as a enemy in Chicago. He had the Chicago flag draped around his shoulders. Dropped that. He had the Crimea River on the leather jacket. And I mean, this was a
Did
very
you notice that his pants were shattered glass?
real glass. Yep. And this crowd, I mean, it wasn't 100% booze. I would say it was almost 50-50. You had half the crowd that was behind Perry's, singing, "Oh, cry me a river." But there was a CM Punk chants. There was a CM Punk fan a few rows in front of us. He was giving Perry the bird the whole time, and big back and forth chants. "You got choked out." "No, he didn't." And so, yeah, the crowd was just electric for this thing.
Yeah, this man, Jack Perry came out with a riot squad with masks and fucking shields and Kevlar, as if the crowd might riot, you know?
Yeah, you never know. Yeah, some CM Punk fans that might jump in there and try to choke him a little bit.
Um, yeah, this was quite the. I haven't gone back. If there was any match where I'm like, I'd probably want to go back and rewatch it just to kind of see and hear what was picked up in the audio, it'd probably be this one because it was very much like an electric audience. To me, I thought it was like a very lively crowd, like very, very involved. It was awesome to see like the back and forth chants, but I wasn't like, this is the craziest crowd I've ever been in. But then you jump online and people are like, fucking star Jack Perry. Like, this is one of the greatest moments in wrestling. And I was like, oh man, like, I don't know. It didn't, to me, being in the audience, it definitely was, I would use the word electric, but it didn't come across as something where I was like, "Oh, this is a historical moment that I'm witnessing." Because I've been in crowds that were much more lively, even in a split environment than this. Like, I think back to like the first All In, and I'm like, that was like, the Rock, the goosebumps on the arm. You know what I'm saying? But there were huge pockets of groups where there were, and here's one thing I noticed, Jeremy, and this is kind of my own theory. Most of the strong Jack Perry support that you heard was on the ground floor, and
Mhm.
most of the really loud punk support kind of came from the upper decks. And I think what that probably is related to, and I'm just guessing here, you probably had your die-hard New Japan fans on the floor. The people that are like, I have to pay whatever it costs to be as close as I possibly can be. They tended, and I'm not saying there weren't like we had people around us that like Jack or that like Punk for sure, but the majority, it seemed like they were Jack Perry supporters. And then in the crowd, up in the bleachers, that was probably your standard Chicago wrestling fan who's like, New Japan's here, I'm gonna go see them, but I still support Punk. Like, that's just what I'm thinking it probably was, because that's what it
Mhm.
sounded like to me.
Yeah, I mean, the crowd was definitely electric. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if historic is the right word to use for it, but for
That's
that,
what it sounded like online. Like the fervor that it drew online, it seemed like that.
yeah, but I don't know. It was still pretty awesome to be in that crowd and just kind of witness that and how it all broke down. You had Umino was doing the old Jurassic Express wave, and the crowd was oh, 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 oh,
Yeah.
oh, oh, and there was Luchasaurus chants, and so this crowd is so yeah, it was a great crowd, great match. The heat for this was it's probably one of the most heated matches of the whole show. And Jack
I would
Perry
say
was
it was.
yeah.
Other
Um
than maybe the main event. The main well, and the brawl. There's some good stuff on this show.
and Perry was doing all the right things. He did the punk knee combo in the corner. He
I
attempted
popped for that.
yeah, that was great. He attempted to go to sleep. So he was doing all that punk stuff, and so
When
great
they
back and forth.
when they said that you got choked out, no, he didn't. He locked on a fucking guillotine choke on Shota Umino. That blew the crowd up when he did that shit.
Yeah, that was great. So yeah, and this match was way better than their New Japan Cup matchup. Perry actually
So much better.
yeah, showcase, what he can do. And yeah, it was a great back and forth. Like I mentioned, he attempted the GTS towards the end. That was the downfall for him that allowed Roughneck to hit the Death Rider 1, 2, 3. Umino gets the big win over Jack Perry, gets his revenge. And then post match, they end up shaking hands, which led the wrestling world to believe that this was Jack Perry's last New Japan date and that he'd be returning back to AEW soon. Also, like I said, they showed that footage on Dynamite last week, and there are rumors that he might reappear at Dynasty to help the Young Bucks defeat FTR in that AEW tag title match. So we'll see what happens with Jack Perry moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I loved the story aspect of Jack Perry being out there on his own without the House of Torture and it being somewhat his own home, like his like home base, his home ground, because it's America, but it's not because it's Chicago and that's Punk's town. And so he's he's on his own territory, but he's trying to beat Shota Umino cleanly and prove that he's the superior of the two of them. And at the same time, he's so transfixed on what's going on with the crowd, the perception of him in light of CM Punk and everything like that. And that became his undoing and his downfall. Like the reason he lost the match, even though he probably could have won it, was that he continuously played up and played into the mind games and the tactics from the audience in Chicago. A little bit torn on this because I could see at the same time how there were probably, and I've heard a little bit of this sentiment. There were, your New Japan gatekeepery diehard fans that were like, how does this play into Shota Umino? And I think that there is some validity there. Um, but it's sort of a convergence of different storylines all taking place on the same axis at this point.
Mhm.
Um, and for people that were in the know, I mean, I was a little torn as a Shota Umino fan because you know me, like I'm no Punk fan. So anytime anything happened in the match related to Jack Perry, and I'm not even really a Jack Perry fan, but anything that was chanted or that occurred that was anti-Punk, that was pro Jack Perry, I was into that. Like I was part of some of those chants. But then at the same time, I wanted Shota Umino to win the match. So anytime Jack Perry did something extremely heelish towards Shota Umino, like it brought me back into this kind of unique place where it was like, okay, I actually support Shooter. Um, I think this was a very unique setting because I don't think it's something that would have worked in Japan. It wouldn't have worked in other parts of the country. Like only on this night with this audience with these set of circumstances could this unique match environment really have been pulled off the way it was.
Yeah, I think everything kind of lined up perfectly for Jack Perry on this night, and yeah, the guy was a star on this night, and like he had a crowd in the palm of his hand, and hopefully this is something that he could use to continue to elevate his star power, and he can actually continue to capitalize on this. But as far as Shota Umino, I mean, Umino looked great in the match, and they're seeming to be doing this thing with Umino where he always has to kind of fight the ghost from his past. He always has to kind of avenge a loss that he suffered in the past. And so he lost to Perry in the New Japan Cup. He needed to avenge that loss to be able to move on and move forward. And so got the big win here in a better match in front of a hot crowd. Biggest New Japan strong show, biggest New Japan US show probably since Madison Square Garden, maybe. And
Well, I mean, Strong didn't even exist then, so but for US shows, yeah.
yeah. So yeah, big stage, big win, and we'll talk about it later. But he's one of the few Japanese talent that got a win on this show as well. So a lot of good things here for Umino, and also we'll talk about his involvement in the post match angle at the end of the main event. We have a ton of questions here that we need to dive into. First from Rambo and Slam Pig, he says, if Friday's show is the end of Jack Perry's run in NJPW for now, what are your thoughts on it overall? Did Jack's brief time in NJPW serve him well? And did it serve NJPW well? Will we see more mini excursions from AEW talent like this, or was this a unique situation?
I don't think it was a unique situation if you really look back at the partnership between these two companies. So far, just off the top of my head, I can think of two other similar examples. And I'm not talking about guys that have worked for New Japan in the past, returning, nothing like that. But like we have had two examples of young AEW stars or talents coming to New Japan for mini excursions, maybe not as involved as joining a faction and having a storyline the way that Jack Perry's was. But if you recall, we had what's wrong with me? Why do I forget names? Who's in BCC that worked Super Juniors a few years ago?
Wheeler, Utah.
Yeah, Wheeler, Utah, which I guess that is skirting the line a little bit because even Wheeler, Utah had worked extensively with New Japan of America slash Strong quite a bit before making his jump. But by the time he worked Super Juniors, he was firmly an AEW talent. And that was sort of like a bit of a learning excursion. They let him come work Super Juniors right in the middle. And it might have been to the detriment of him right in the middle of his like big push that they were putting him through. And he's never really seemed to fully recover since taking that time off and returning back to their product. And then the Gates of Agony, they worked World Tag League this past year, which again, those are both instances where people came and worked tournaments, but those are long, hard tours that those guys are working. That's a lot of matches, it's a lot of experience, it's a lot of travel and opportunity. And you could even argue that they worked a much busier and involved schedule than Jack Perry did for his run in New Japan. But with Jack Perry, even though it was less dates, it was a more pronounced storyline, angles, joined a faction, had an established rivalry that culminated at a big show. So, you know, different flavors of the same of a different side of the coin, but that's three examples where we've seen this sort of been utilized up to this point, and I don't expect it to be the last time that they do this.
Yeah, I think they'll definitely continue to use that partnership to give guys different experiences. Also, this year for Super Juniors, we got Blake Christian in there. I know he's more of an ROH guy, but he's still a part of the Converse, and I'm sure we'll see other guys.
ROH is AEW.
Yeah,
it's bullshit for anyone that, I mean, on paper they're separate companies, but it's the same company.
Yeah, it's Red and Black Dynamite.
Yeah.
And so we're gonna continue to see guys come over. I think the only kind of unique thing about Jack's situation is obviously he was suspended and all the drama from the all in fight. But I thought that kind of played into him coming in. So they did use that to kind of bring him in to New Japan. As far as his overall run, I would say the stuff in Japan was a little bit underwhelming. I mean, we talked about it earlier. He had that New Japan Cup match with Umino. That wasn't great. And then just throughout the tournament, he didn't really have any standout matches. And then, he's in a bunch of undercard tag match stuff after that and just kind of doing House of Torture stuff. And so that wasn't really interesting or intriguing. I'm sure, House of Torture fans probably maybe enjoyed it and liked it, but I really didn't find anything he did in Japan compelling. I think the most compelling part of his run was this night, Windy City Riot, was probably the best part of his New Japan run. And, hopefully maybe he did like learn stuff in working Japan, working those tours and communication and maybe calling a match and stuff like that. Maybe that was beneficial for him. But as far as his run for a fan on screen, I can't say that it was super great or anything.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna touch on the same points that you brought up, Jeremy, but I agree with your points there. As far as ways that it might have benefited him, I think that just getting him back into the public's awareness after the 7 months of him not working and putting him on a pretty prominent stage without returning him to television, that was probably a benefit. It lined up with the timing of them doing the unveiling of this backstage footage, for better or for worse. It definitely enlivened this crowd and this match and this stage. So it did seem like this is the end of his run. We had the handshake between him and Umino, which heels never usually do shit like that unless like they're gone. So it did seem like for the time being, we're done with Jack Perry. But the other benefit is him being the talk of the town when he first made the at Battle in the Valley, when he jumped the rail and unveiled the scapegoat character, and he was able to kind of workshop this scapegoat character. I don't know if it's going to remain the same or if they're going to tweak it or change it by the time he gets back to TNT and AEW television, but uh it was a good opportunity for him to get that out there.
Yeah, and as far as a branding, that's been really great for him. He has his own merchandise line, the Scapegoat line. He's been selling out T-shirts like hotcakes, and he's really kind of developed this scapegoat brand. So, as far as elevating him again as a star, he's been able to connect with fans, get his merch out there, and create this whole scapegoat brand and persona.
There's an audience that have been galvanized by the ongoings of the past couple weeks and even longer than that, that are buying this shirt to show their support. So, we'll see how it all shakes out for them and for their business. But I mean, to steal a line from Cody Rhodes, he's gone from undesirable to undeniable. This man's selling a lot of shirts.
Next question here from Sad Goal 8860. Did you guys also think it was weird how quickly Jack and Shota made up after their match at Windy City Riot? Like, since when does anyone in House of Torture shake hands after a loss? Do you think this marks the end of Jack's place in that faction?
I agree. I thought it was weird too. And like I said earlier, I think it's a sign that he is done at this point. And it almost kind of I don't want to do too much headcanon shit, but it almost feels like the feud between him and Shota Umino wasn't so much about Umino as much as it was about what Umino represents. He is a very similar in position to the way Shota Umino had been positioned in AEW, and there was almost a bit of
Perry,
like what's that?
the way Perry was positioned in AEW? You
Did I say something different?
said Umino.
Oh, my bad. Yeah. So yeah, the way Jack Perry had been positioned as Jungle Boy in AEW before his ousting, and so it's like he almost has to take out his frustration on Umino because he's sort of pariahed here in the land of misfit toys, and how's he going to get his way back and make a statement, take out a guy that was in a similar position to where he was prior to him being ousted from the company. And ultimately they traded wins. He got the better of him, but like at the end of the day, he went to Chicago and faced off, with the Chicago crowd, and it wasn't so much about actually hating Shota Umino. It had more to do with what he represented. That's kind of what I gleaned out of it, anyways.
Yeah, and as far as his placements in House of Torture, we talked about this for weeks now, that we could easily see him just leaving and them never mentioning that he was a part of the house ever again, and that might be the case because yeah, very weird here shaking hands, and it's kind of like the a pandemic that's going on now, where people have to shake hands after a match when their feud is over and they're leaving, and I would have rather him just roll out and just
Roll out.
um, so yeah, so he's probably done with the house, and yeah, his New Japan run is probably over.